Welcome back to the second week of the Field of 68 Mid-Major Show. I'm your host, Sean Paul, joined by Rocco Miller in a very nice location here. He's got a fireplace in front of him. He's set up for this occasion very well. Looks like a nice romantic evening. So let's get into it here. We have a lot of romantic stuff to talk about, including ASUN basketball, talking about some of the winners and losers of the first week of Mid-Major Hoops. But Rocco, how you doing?
I'm good. How could you not be romantic about the Atlantic Sun Conference after a week like last week? We'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about that quite a bit today. I'm looking forward to that. Just an eye-popping week for about half the league. And then outside of that, yeah, it's crazy. That week went by quick, but a lot of
Did.
data to start chewing on and a lot of games to look forward to this week. So, here we go. We're rocking and rolling. This will be our routine from now on, and
Mm-hmm.
already enjoying the process.
Yeah, and we have a very lengthy interview with head coach Matt Driscoll coming later in the show, right
A
at
lot
the
of
end after we
fun.
talk about the A-Sun. He is awesome. His energy, I wish I had that energy. I mean, he's quite a bit older than me, and I couldn't dream of having that kind of energy. It's pretty infectious. But without further ado, let's get into some winners and losers of the week for mid-major basketball. Let's kick it off with Rocco. What's your first winner of the week?
Yeah, well, I got to go with my latest top team in the entire what we call mid major here, but you could call it the other 22 conferences, non-power, whatever. At UC Irvine, Anteaters accomplished more last week than anybody, just based on the fact that they went on the road twice at Loyola Marymount, up the road in LA, and thoroughly dominated the Lions in a game where not only Bent Lupton was a big factor, he was a big factor in both wins, but Andre Henry was just absolutely stellar, solid across the board. Led the Eaters with 17 points, and that game was really never in doubt down the stretch. Then they go to Northern Iowa on Sunday to wrap the week up in a really important matchup for. I think I had them 7-8 in my preseason poll
Hmm.
to try to figure out who these teams are. And Irvine is by far the more polished team. Not only did they go all the way to Cedar Falls, Iowa, but they won by 20 points. And uh,
Insane.
the defense was on point. They barely, you can't really get second chance opportunities against this team. They
Hmm.
already, and I know the KenPom data is so early, we really can't give it that much credit, but it's a little clue. As of right now, they have a top 25 defense nationally. They topped, I think they're 10th in allowing any kind of offensive rebounding at all. And they played two decent teams on the road, if not good teams. So not only are they belonging in the top 10 for us wherever they land, but they've got the proof to back it up. And now they get to get some days off and host Pepperdine this weekend, which they should be
Should
okay in
win.
that
They'll
match.
be favored to
Should
do
win.
so quite heavily.
Yes.
Yeah, UC Irvine, I mean, this is a good team. Russ Turner, I mean, he's one of the best coaches, most consistent coaches in college basketball. And the thing for me is he's very Tom Izzo, Matt Painter-like in the way in which he assembles his roster. He's never going to have five or six transfers on a roster. That is just not what he does. But he's going to add one or two guys that he can sprinkle into the rotation. Like he lost Darren Saran to Stanford, adds Miles Chee to replace him from Chattanooga, has 10 points against Northern Iowa, and he also added Kyle Evans from Colorado State. Came off the bench with 10 points in 13 minutes, kind of as a guy who can give a breather to
A
Ben
lot of depth.
Loyston and Devin Tillis. So you have two guys there who are big transfer ads. This isn't going to be a team that's going to overwhelm you offensively or is going to stand out in any kind of way like that, but they're going to be tough, they're going to defend, and as Rocco pointed out, they're going to rebound. This is the best team in the Big West in a league that has a lot of really good teams, as we saw this week. But heading into my first winner of the week, I was very impressed on Saturday night the way that I saw Robert Jones's Norfolk State team play. I mean, this
Yeah,
team is always
legit.
consistent. Yeah, they beat James Madison, and James Madison was coming fresh off a win against Ohio, and that was a game in which I was like, this James Madison team is pretty cohesive for a team that has like 11 new guys. But what Rob Jones does every single year is he pretty much replaces whoever his best guard is with another transfer guard who's there for a year or two. Last year was Jamari Thomas, who came in from UNCW. He transferred to South Carolina. This year he added Brian Moore, a guy that I've been a fan of since his JUCO days. He's always been super athletic. He's never been a great shooter, but he's always good at finishing and drawing fouls and doing that kind of stuff. And I think that fits this offense really well. And now Norfolk State has a really good guard trio with him, Sincere McMahon, who's been around in college basketball in the mid-major space for a while at Western Carolina, then Winthrop, now Norfolk State, and Christian Ings. That is a really good trio of guards for Norfolk State. And then they also have some good bigs with Tyrell Bladen, who is really good in this one, 6'10". He's not like a Chris Bankston type of guy where he's going to be that dominant, but he's that level of, he'll have that kind of role in this offense. The one question I would have for this team is how good are they shooting wise, because that's not what Moore does. And overall, they did shoot the ball fairly well, but they're going to be more of a lower volume shooting team. But it's hard not to be impressed by the way. First off, James Madison going to play at Norfolk State. That's not an easy environment to play in. So credit to them for scheduling that game in the first place. But
Right.
Norfolk State sits at 3-0 with two non-Division I wins and just an overwhelming, dominant win over a James Madison team that will have a say in whatever happens in the Sun Belt this year.
They will. And it was a little risky. I talked with James Madison a lot in the offseason to take that game on in the first week of the year when you got
Mm-hmm.
all these new pieces. I know some of those guys are familiar from their previous stops, but man, that's a tough one. It is a home and home series, so James Madison will get them at home next year. That'll be another. It's an exciting rivalry regionally. So credit to Norfolk State. That was exciting to see. Sean, for my other winner, and maybe this is more of a knock on McNeese a little bit, and the game was down the street from Brookings, but South Dakota State knocking off McNeese right here on Field of 68 to start the
It
year
was.
on opening night was the big story of opening night, really, especially in mid-major basketball. I think it's an opportunity to call out how unbelievable it is that South Dakota State landed Oscar Clough, a guy
Insane.
that is he's not only like a difference maker in the paint and a productive player, but he's also an emotional leader. He's a
Mm-hmm.
high IQ player. He makes his teammates better, almost like a mini Krutwig,
Oh,
and
I like that.
not in terms of getting the ball at the top of the paint all the time, but just in terms of like keeping his teammates on track. And he's going to be invaluable in
The
the league like
communication.
Yeah, exactly. He's got so much experience. So you add that to a solid core that was coming back, but they mix in a couple freshmen with Owen Larson and Joe Saylor. Having a guy like Clough in there is just so critical to those other guys around him's development. And he was just a beast that night. 14 rebounds, 14 points.
Couldn't
Did a
stop him.
little bit of everything. Yeah, and he took he basically helped on Shoemate and on Brandon Murray, and those guys had less than stellar nights, not very efficient games. Kadir Copeland off the bench was really like not a factor at all for McNeese.
Mm-mm.
So some big surprises, like Sincere Parker only played 10 minutes.
That was
So
weird
maybe
too. That was
yeah,
odd. I mean,
yeah.
I just don't. That rotation's kind of weird in general right now. I'm hoping we get a little more clarification on what that looks like in league play because it's very odd right now.
And that's the weirdest thing about the opening, few weeks of the season, maybe even the whole month of November, is that you're going to have situations like that. But this is the biggest winners section, so I'm going to focus on South Dakota State
Yeah, that's
because
fair.
they still had to beat a beast of a team that's really
Mm-hmm.
deep and
Big
coached
time.
by Will Wade, and they got it done. And they made a big splashdown opening night, and the home fans were happy.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
And then
like you
they
said,
played Long Beach State over the weekend in a really close game and almost
Mhm.
ruined this award, but they squeaked it out 80-79 in a late rally by the beach. But otherwise, yeah, 2-0 for the Jackrabbits, and that's an impressive start.
Yeah, Devin Askew, one of the weirder stat lines you'll see in that game. 5 of 20 shooting, but he scored
Yeah,
27 points because he was living at the free throw line. But
he
Oscar
was.
Clough, like, it's really interesting that they got him because he did start for a high major team that was an NCAA tournament team that won an NCAA tournament game last year. And,
Right.
and it's just so strange to me that I don't know what South Dakota State's NIL situation is like, but there
It's
had to
good.
have been high major schools that were offering more, though. Like, there's some way worse big men that are playing high major basketball right now than Oscar Clough that almost certainly got more money than him. So it was like, that's one of the bigger steals of the offseason, right?
Easily. Yeah, and especially this levels. I mean, how
Hmm.
many 6'11", 260-pound men are out there with all that experience, like you said, coming off of an NCAA tournament win from a power conference school, and where the biggest thing in the portal is big men.
Hmm.
I just can't believe like not even a high level blue blood might give him a bigger bag to just be a
A
backup.
bench guy, yeah, like
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a play that role that Patrick Tapey played for Duke like 4 years ago. Like just
it's
be
crazy.
there and play if you need him to. I couldn't believe it, but honestly, the thing for me is Joe Saylor. Like he was awesome, and I didn't
He was.
know. I didn't know a lot about him. I'll be completely honest. I didn't know he's like the most prolific high school player in South Dakota basketball history. I'm not super in tune to my South Dakota high school basketball knowledge these days, but he's a stud. Like I really got
Yeah, he
to
is.
enjoy watching him in that game against McNeese and then checking him out against Long Beach also. He is a straight up bucket, and that kid is confident. He is not scared to get shots up, and he's just a scorer. He really fits in that Nate Walters, Baylor Shireman. He didn't play like all
Mhm.
of them, but Baylor Shireman, Zeke Mayo, he could be the next star in that group of really good players. Obviously, Mike Dom, too. Just a group of dudes who were star players at South Dakota State. And I think he could be that guy. And it probably hits a little bit closer to home to him because it's his hometown team. So, South Dakota State, they are definitely going to be a winner. And then my last winner that I'm going to talk about here um, is going to be. Hold on, blanked on it for a second.
You go in Louisiana Tech?
Louisiana Tech, that's right. I was going back to look at our text to find out which one I landed on. But Louisiana Tech, I can't express how impressed I was. Speaking of former high major big men, how good Daniel Batcho was in that game against UT Arlington. Like he was just straight up dominant. That's a UT Arlington team that you liked a lot, and I get why you
Yep.
liked them a lot. And
Yep.
they have some good bigs. Lance Ware didn't play in that game, but they still had Troy Hupstead. They still
Upset's
had
awesome.
Rayshawn Seamster. Yeah, they still had some dudes. But Daniel Batcho had 28 points, 10 of 12 shooting, 8 for 10 from the line. This was a team that is focused on getting Batcho the ball, but now he actually has dudes that he can pass the ball to, that he can offensive rebound from, because Caden Cooper had a very strong week also. He only had 9 points in this game, but the prior game he really showed out. And Amari Abram had 23
Yeah.
points in this game. Those are
Five
two
threes.
guards. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Those are two guards with size and that can score the basketball that this Louisiana Tech team simply didn't have a year ago. And they also have Sean Newman as their point guard. Great name, spells it correctly and everything. He had 10 points with 11 assists, no turnovers. If you're going to get a game like that from your point guard, who was their starter at the point guard position last year, and he doesn't have to worry about scoring nearly as much, if he can just facilitate, get the ball to Batcho, get the ball to Cooper, get the ball to Abram, this Louisiana Tech team is going to be incredibly tough to stop. I mean, last year, obviously, they had their problems with Sam Houston State. They couldn't get past them, and obviously, they fell short of making the NCAA tournament, losing in the conference tournament. But their rotation's not super deep. They only played 6 guys more than 10 minutes, but you know what you're going to get from that starting lineup. It's 3 guys that used to play at the high major level with Cooper, or 4 guys, really, because Bacho, Abram, Cooper, and
Yep.
Jeffries all used to be at the high major level, and then Sean Newman. So you're getting a lot of guys who are on the bounce back, downswing kind of thing, and I was really impressed by how this team played. They are the clear favorites in Conference USA.
Right, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot to like in Conference USA. You know that Middle Tennessee team looks amazing as
They
well,
look
but
great. Yeah.
they do. But yeah, Louisiana Tech. I mean, in this particular matchup, you know, Batcho had 3 inches or more on all of those defenders, whether it was Hupstead or Seamster or even Deontay Smith's also 6'7", but he's also got good weight advantage as well at 245, and he's going to have that advantage in a lot of these matchups at this level,
Hmm.
and that'll swing over to conference play too. I just watched FIU play on opening night. I mean, that's a team obviously probably towards the bottom, but they're not very big, and
Against Rice that game.
yeah, that was the one.
Yeah, that was a game.
Had to check that out. But no, my point is that they're going to expose teams like Arlington that just surely can't match up, and I
Hmm.
think that's what we saw here. And credit to Talvin Hester and the coaching staff for really coming out with a great game plan, telling Newman and working with Sean Newman on a great game plan. And I think this will carry forward quite a bit. They've got a big game coming up here in New York City with UMass. Sorry, that's actually in Nassau Coliseum out in Long Island, but close to New York City, and that will be another opportunity to knock off a pretty good level A10 team. So looking forward to seeing how they do there, and I think they'll have a little bit more of a size challenge in that matchup.
Absolutely, and obviously talking good about some teams here. Your winners were now I'm blanking on your winners. Who were your winners?
South Dakota State and UC Irvine,
Yeah, my winners are Louisiana Tech and
Norfolk State.
Norfolk State. Yeah, I don't know why I'm blanking on those. But moving on to the losers here, I know I won't blank on those because I've thought a lot about
We've
those the
had a
last
fun
couple
day today.
minutes. Yeah, now I got to focus on the losers. So who are your losers for this week?
Yeah, and I don't like the word losers too much because I do
They're
think
not losing teams, but they lost this week.
right.
So
They did, and there was just a couple brutal examples, and I think this one I'm going to start with is it doesn't get much more brutal than this. But Mike Jones just got the job at Old Dominion. They have the home opener, just like every almost every Sun Belt team did against a MAC opponent. They matched them up with Buffalo, both teams coming off of rough years, looking to turn things around. Both Old Dominion with a new coach, and Buffalo with their second year trying to reload, get some better players in there, and they have a great freshman that played well. But they end up losing that game on a back-breaking buzzer beater, and that was a chance to really start the Mike Jones era off the right way with a good home win. Didn't work out. Then they turn around Saturday and they go to Tucson and just get absolutely crushed by almost 60, 102 to 44. And it was a brutal week as well, because from the free throw line, they're shooting 40% as a team. So there is a lot for this Old Dominion team to work on. You always want to see a coach come in and be able to hit the ground running, and they had that opportunity. Now it's gone. They will get Maryland Eastern Shore this Friday, so ideally there's a chance for them to really get their confidence back. But Road Radford here coming up on Tuesday could be another tough one, and you just hate to see that for a new coach to lose that way, and then doesn't get much worse than a 58-point loss at Arizona, which of course Tommy Lloyd's team could do that to a lot of teams at this level.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you have that much talent coming in and just different pieces you're trying to fit in there, it's going to be a bit of a tough first season probably for Old Dominion under Mike Jones, but I think they'll get it going eventually. And my first loser, I'm going with a bit of a trend here. My first loser is going to be the Yale Bulldogs. Obviously, it wasn't going to be easy, and right now having a tough time with Purdue. Most teams probably will at this level, but
I would hope so.
they lost a lot from last year. They lost Danny Wolf. They lost August Mahoney. But they still do get some pieces back with John Poulikitis and Bez Mbang. So those are good pieces to get back. And Nick Townsend, who played relatively well this week. But you don't have a Danny Wolf kind of guy at that 5 spot. And I think we're kind of noticing not having that offensive weapon at the 5 is a bit of a problem for this Yale team based on what they were last year, because Wolf was so big for them. I mean, size-wise, his shooting, just everything he did made this Yale team a little bit more versatile. And without him, I think it limits what they can do a bit offensively, and they really have to rely on Poulikitis and Mbang. They lost a game against UIC, a UIC team that did look quite impressive, but they allowed 91 points. This Yale team should be a lot better defensively than what they were in this one. Their offense was fine still. They shot 44% from the field, 45% from 3. But even last year, this is a game where how good their offense was, they could have found a way to win this game. But defensively, they have certainly taken some steps back from where they've been in the past, and that was quite noticeable in this game. UIC just had their way with them, especially Tym Freeman. He had a great game, and Jordan Mason. Yeah, those guards were really tough for them to stop, the athleticism. So that might not be as big of a problem in Ivy League play, but there is some good teams in the Ivy, as we've seen. Princeton's really good. Columbia's really good. Both teams are off to a 3-0 start. So Yale, definitely not the favorites to win the Ivy. They weren't to begin with, but would you say they're maybe third more than second now?
It might be too early to say. Obviously, Columbia got the big win at Villanova. Shout out to the Lions, and I love Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa. Just phenomenal in all 3 wins last week, including the Nova game, of course. So I guess that's fair for the current time. I would still expect, if Columbia finished ahead of Yale, I would still be a little impressed. Surprised, yeah. But maybe we'll get to the end of the month, and that will become more clear on the Columbia side. So curious about that, and I'm glad you brought up the Ivy League, because my second loser is it's another hard one to even say.
We're hitting the Ivy League hard. Sorry, guys.
We probably will a lot, because this is a good league. So
yeah.
The Brown Bears, they've just gotten gut punch after gut punch ever since probably 3 weeks before the season started, starting with the injury news to Nuna Owusu Amane that he would miss the year. Arguably either one of the best returning players in the Ivy, probably not arguable that he was the best returning big man in the league. So they have to start off on that ground, but they still have a lot of solid pieces from last year's great run to end the year to get to the Ivy championship game, led by Keno Lilly Jr. So they get into 2 dogfights in week 1. In the first game, they go to Siena on the road in Jerry McNamara's debut, and they pretty much controlled the game. With a minute to go, they had a 93.5% win probability, and they just missed free throw, and Siena gets the thing to overtime. They end up losing by 1 point in overtime. So that's just a brutal way to start the year, but it's on the road, and you can kind of shake it off. You're going to go home, and Sunday they get Maine at home. And again, Maine's a program I think both of us like. I think they were my dark horse pick in the America East to make some noise this year. And again, it's almost the same formula. With 5 minutes to go, they had a 91.5% win probability, and just a couple key possessions in there let the Black Bears back into the game. and they lose that one by 2 at home. So 2 losses that were just gut punch. Could have, good teams close those games out, and Brown let those both off the hook. And they're, of course, dealing with a shorthanded lineup. Now, some of their other elements are encouraging, like their offensive rebounding at a high rate despite not having the big man. They're doing some other things well defensively so far, and they only lost heartbreakers. So it's not like they're that far off. They can get this corrected, and they've got 3 home games coming up for their MTE with New Hampshire, Holy Cross, and Sacred Heart. So ideally, Brown will get back on track, but that was just a super brutal week 1 for them.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that free throw shooting, and that's just something in a tight game that will kill you. I mean, that is why
Yep.
they lost both of these games. They went 8 for 13 from the line against Siena. Not great. They didn't get there much, but that's you can't miss
Right.
5 free throws in a tight game where the spread is only 2 points at the end. But against Maine, like you can easily point to that. 14 for 27 from the free throw line, and Maine was 11 of 15. That's the difference in a game like this. And they led by
Yep.
7 with 6 minutes left, and they lost that game. So that's something they're really going to have to correct moving forward here. And the interesting thing is the fact that their rebounding has still been quite good, despite not having Nana Owusu Anane and obviously
Yep.
not having Kelu Anya, who's now at St. Louis. But they started 2 guys
Mm-hmm.
last year that were 6'8". This year, and that's not an option for them. They start Landon Lewis, who's 6'7". Their next
Yep.
biggest player is Aaron Cooley at 6'5", and he's really
5.
yeah. So their other
Yep.
3 players, 6'3", 6 foot, 6 foot. So this is a team that is extremely small, and that really does worry me when they're heading into Ivy League play. That I just don't know if they're going to be able to compete that way. They're going to have to be elite offensively, or just good enough rebounding wise to cover up some of those problems. But against teams like Princeton, where you have Caden Pierce and you have some of these guys who can really rebound it, I don't know how that's going to work out. But the other loser for me was another team that was in the tournament last year, and I watched most of this game, and I came away just super like it didn't look like the Samford that we saw last year. And obviously that was going to be tough because they lost so much. And obviously we touched on that in the preseason episode. They allowed 88 points to Cornell, who's a good team, but they lost a lot of pieces too. They lost their head coach, Brian Earl, to William and Mary. They lost Chris Mannon. They lost Keller Boothby. They lost Sean Hansen. They lost a lot of pieces. And Cornell didn't shoot it well. They went 10 of 35 from 3. But Samford's offense was a nightmare in this game. They still scored 86 points, but they shot 38% from the field, 28% from 3, and everything just looked incredibly disjointed, which was so strange for a team like this. They almost played too fast for their own good, it felt like, which the Stanford's going to play fast. That's what Bucky McMillan does, but it typically didn't look like it was just straight up to their detriment. And they looked just like they're playing way too fast, not a lot of good shots, and they turned the ball over 13 times. They forced 18 turnovers, so they won the turnover battle. But free throw wise, they won that. So all the little things you would expect them to do, they won all those battles. Their offense wasn't really good enough in this game. They allowed too many points inside, a few too many offensive rebounds late. Guy Ragland had a really good play late. But obviously Cornell wins it on a game winner. But Samford just didn't look nearly as crisp as they did last year. And I'm not sure if that's something that's going to change, but their efficiency they weren't nearly as efficient as I would have expected them to be with all the pieces that they have. And their defense struggled. Still 1.04 points per possession, but you're so used to Samford teams shooting better than 28% from 3. I don't know if that's just a one-game thing or if it's going to be more of a struggle throughout the year, but they're going to need Trey Fort to be a little bit better than he was. 1 for 6 from 3. Rylan Jones, he was pretty solid. He had 16 points, but he turned it over 3 times. That's more than you'd expect from him. I still think they're trying to figure out rotations and all those things. I'd expect Jaden Brownell to maybe start at some point, but they're clearly not as good as they were last year early in the season. We'll see if that changes for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's a tough travel too, going up from
Mm,
Birmingham to upstate New York. Not the easiest trip, but and
no.
of course both systems are high fly in tempo with find the open shooter and let it fly. So really fun game from that standpoint. But yeah, you I think it's just because you've been so accustomed to seeing Sanford be able to handle this level, especially with Cornell having the coaching change with Coach Jakes. Congratulations,
Hmm.
Coach, on your win,
Hmm.
big win to start his career
Absolutely.
as a head coach. But yeah, it was one of those. It'll be interesting to see how these teams react from here to both because Cornell I think's got to go to LaSalle here coming up early in this week, and Sanford's going to have a non-D1, but then they play an interesting North Alabama team on the road on Friday night. So yeah,
Some good guards there.
yeah, we have all these, fun little nuanced mid-major matchups sprinkled in these first couple of weeks. So we're going to keep learning as we go. And so the best coaches and the best teams at this level are the ones who are the best at making adjustments after performances like that.
Absolutely. And I would say the conference that probably had some of the least turnover among their coaches from last year to this year is the Atlantic Sun Conference. And I think that's really paying dividends for them early in the season. As we saw North Florida, the Ospreys, pick up a pair of wins on the road, their first ever win over an SEC program, I believe, their first ever win over an ACC program. That I didn't misspeak. They did win a game over at SEC and an ACC school, beating Georgia Tech on Sunday, beating South Carolina last Monday. And it was just incredibly impressive what we saw from them. But they weren't the only ASUN school that really stood out. Austin Peay went on the road and beat Butler. Lipscomb had a win at Duquesne. They had another win throughout the week too. We've seen all these schools really be good so far. Some don't have any wins, but the ones that do have wins have been incredibly impressive so far, including North Alabama, who won a game at Air Force, which Air Force is the worst team in the Mountain West, but still that altitude in Colorado, that's a tough place to play. It's not easy. That system's kind of tough. So the
And
A-Sun,
they dominated
yeah,
the game. Like, it
73 to
wasn't even a close
57.
game.
That was a
Yeah.
blowout. So
Yep.
what's your takeaway from the A-Sun so far? Is there anything that's really changed for you? You have North Florida ranked as your highest A-Sun team. Is that just a
Yeah.
byproduct of them being 3-0 in the fashion in which they've won those games? Or do you think when we turn the page 2 months from now, they are actually going to be the best team heading into conference play?
Yeah, it's hard to say right now, but I mean, I watched the tape on their two big wins,
Mm-hmm.
and they are athletic. Like, they are very athletic. They can slash, they can shoot. You know, they had that reputation last year and years prior for just letting it fly. And you saw 30 plus 3-point attempts in these games, and they still found ways to win. I think the leadership that you'll hear later today from Coach Driscoll, that's going on behind the scenes, is helping move the needle. And the ranking that I put out, here at the start of the week is, if you have a resume like theirs, you're automatically going to move towards the top organically. And then the rest of the teams that we haven't really learned much about is more just about my own feeling and thought about what they're capable of later. So it's a nice little mix right now. But for North Florida, it's definitely earned, and I think they have the chance to somewhat sustain a lot of it. I don't know if they're dominant enough to just run away and get up to like 25 plus wins. That'd be
Mm-hmm.
amazing to see happen. But I do think, like, these top 6 teams that had a big week, Eastern Kentucky as well. I picked East Tennessee State to win the SoCon tournament later this year. I do think it's going to take them a while to get fully gelled at ETSU, but for EKU to go in there in the first week and get a road win, that was pretty big for the league. I think it'll look really good later in the year. And Queens had a nice 14-point easy win over Western Carolina, who now has Tim Kraft. I know they're trying to figure out their team, but that's a nice win for Queens on opening night. So yeah, there's a lot of potential here. Lipscomb, has probably got the most to bank on. North Alabama is going to play that Princeton style, and it's just going to be really fun because North Florida is doing things like kind of like a Alabama level Power 5 plays where you're just going to let threes fly. You're going to depend on your athletes to make good decisions, pretty much play with a lot of speed. Then you're going to have your North Alabama, Princeton style offense. You've got Lipscomb, who's a little bit more spread it out, let it fly as well. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that's the beauty of the league and how these guys adjust. And, there's just going to be a ton of chess played in the top half of the league. And I think the league, the reason why it deserves all the love it's getting this week is not only for the wins they got, but I think it was a league overlooked in scheduling and going into the season. It looked like a really down year because we couldn't see how some of these guys without very many numbers in years past have actually developed, and that's what we get to finally learn here in the first week.
Yeah, I mean North Florida, like Josh Harris is a guy like I didn't know anything
Amazing.
about him. Yeah, I didn't know anything
Yeah.
about him until a little bit in that first game that I didn't really get to watch much of because there was like 500 games happening at once. So that wasn't really something I was paying attention to until the end. But I
Right.
watched that entire North Florida game where they just dismantled a really solid Charleston Southern team that was without Allen Sumler, who's their really good guard, but they still dominated that team with Tajay Kelly. And what they did against them was they're able to they were able to let them shoot some threes. 'Cause that's not Charleston Southern's strength. They were able to pull Kelly out to the perimeter and use their strength, which is shooting, to dominate them a little bit, use their speed to get by them and get some finishes at the basket. But Josh Harris, right away in that game, he was awesome. He made his imprint on the defensive end, got a big steal, made a couple big plays with offensive rebounds. But then I'm like, if this dude can find out how to shoot, then that'd be big because he didn't shoot it at all in the first game. Then he goes and hits 2 threes later in the half. So I'm just like, if this dude's able to do all this and then he goes and has a 20-point game at Georgia Tech, I was incredibly impressed. And if you go and look at his Twitter profile, like he's one of those dudes where it's not a highly touted recruit. You can tell because he posts all his offers he gets, and he has like where you can find his recruiting stuff, and he's tweeting out his highlights and all that. A lot of guys who are super highly touted recruited are not doing that. They're not on Twitter looking for coaches who are going to recruit them. So you can tell he wasn't a super highly touted recruited guy, which is a big get because that dude can really, really play. He's going to be one of the better do-it-all forwards in the ASUN this season. They lost Chaz Lanier, who was really good against Louisville for Tennessee last Saturday. But Josiah Miles has really stepped into his role and done really well. Then you look at some of the other schools that returned some big pieces. I mean, Austin Peay, they've returned Isaac Haney and Cy Witt, but the biggest story there is LJ Thomas, who's coming
LJ
over from
Thomas.
NC State. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
completely dominant.
He was buried at NC
hmm
State.
He left
So
before
this
the
is
season was over. He wasn't even there for the
right,
Final Four run. So he
right.
was just totally dominant against Butler. He looked like the best guard on the
Incredible.
floor against a Big East team. And you
Yeah.
look at North Alabama, they have two good guards with Lane and Daniel Ortiz. You have Lipscomb, who returns a lot with Jacob Ognasovic, Will Pruitt, Joe Anderson, Charlie Williams, and the guy who really makes a difference there is Giazi Powell, who's a great defender, and he really makes a difference because he brings some athleticism and defense to the table, which that team didn't have a ton of. He replaces Darren Boyd, who is more of their scorer. That team has enough scores. They don't need more scores. They can use Powell in a lot of different ways as like a glue guy kind of player. So that's kind of why I think Lipscomb's still the team to beat. They were really good against Arkansas, even in that loss. They looked really impressive. Arkansas's athleticism just kind of overwhelmed them at the end of the day. But they beat Wofford, they beat Duquesne. Those were two good wins. I still think they're the
Great
favorites
wins.
in this league, exactly. But North Florida, the way they play, they can beat anybody in this league, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting the North Florida that we got 3 times last week, they're going to keep winning. I
Yeah.
mean, they just they had such a resolve about them and a toughness where, they closed both games really strong. They closed both first halves really strong, and they opened both second halves really strong in those two upset
Mhm.
games. And of course, the Charleston Southern game, they just blitzed them from the opening jump.
Yeah, that was
And
not even close.
yeah, and I really do think Charleston Southern could make some noise later this year. The coaches in the Big South picked Charleston Southern fifth, which may have opened a lot of eyes to those really not paying attention to them. They've Saw Nimley inherited the job and he's been trying to build it up, but he's recruiting really well. And I think that win will look really good later in the year too for the Ospreys. But now they got to focus on Georgia. So Coach Driscoll will tell us here in just a minute, the punches keep coming at the Ospreys, but it's an awesome experience for them. And they are one of those programs that every year they try to play as many big Power Fives as they can get. Now, after this year, I don't know if they're going to get many next year, but
Mhm.
they got away with it this year because they're still going to get a chance at Nebraska. They got a couple other big ones besides Georgia too. So, man, if they keep playing like this, they can maybe rip off 3 or 4 high major wins. And who knows? Like if they handle all their other business, we might still be talking about them in the bubble picture later this
That'll
year.
be interesting. Hey, they
That'd
got
be
those two
interesting.
wins that'll age very well, so that'll
They
be one
should.
I'm kind of interested to see how that ends up going. Is there a game this week, kind of rapid fire, real fast, before we head out and go to Coach Matthew Driscoll that is standing out that you're really excited to see?
I mean, there's always a bunch, but yeah, and I think in our level, one of the underrated rivalries. There's actually two of them, and they're both happening on Tuesday, so I'll call them both out. The battle for the Boulevard every year is Belmont Lipscomb, and they used to play
hmm
twice every year, and so now it's down to once. But Lipscomb gets them at home this year, so Belmont trying to reshuffle and reload. They actually looked really good in preseason. They lost a tough 2 point heartbreaker to Furman in opening
At the
week.
buzzer, PJ Smith got
Yeah,
him.
but I think that makes this game more dangerous for Lipscomb because Belmont's going to be working really hard to fix anything that needs to be cleaned up from that loss.
hmm
And that the crowd and the atmosphere at Battle for Boulevard games is nuts.
hmm
So ESPN Plus, 8 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss that on Tuesday. Also later that night, 10 p.m. Eastern for you late nighters. We have the Battle for Riverside with Cal Baptist and UC Riverside. Cal Baptist, both teams, Riverside had to play 2 bye games last week, but they were very competitive at BYU. Hung in there with Oregon for most of the game before falling by about 18 or so. This will be another great game. They get after each other. Cal Baptist is hosting. Those you can't really beat those two rivalries, and you get them early in the year this year.
Yeah, the two games I'm really looking at here are both on Friday. UAB heads to High Point. I believe
Yeah.
that is a home and home, right?
That one is
Yeah.
they actually bought North Texas,
Yeah,
which is
that's
crazy.
ridiculous that that's possible. But UAB
Yep.
heads to High Point. That'll be a good game. UAB, obviously, we don't really talk about them here anymore, sadly. But High Point, we do. That'll be a big game for them, and any chance they really have of earning an at-large maybe hinges on that game. And then Vermont, who beat UAB to begin the season, and then lost two games, including one to Merrimack, who looked really, really good. They're going to head to Iona, going to New Rochelle, to an Iona team that nearly beat Princeton. Probably should have won that game, but Princeton obviously clutched up at the end. But that'll do it here from Rocco and I in the current day. You can follow him on Twitter at Rocco Miller 8. You can follow me on Twitter at Sean Paul CBB. And now we go to North Florida head coach Matthew Driscoll, who we talked to earlier in the day. All right, we're back with our second interview of the Field of 68 mid-major show of the year, and there's nobody better to have on than North Florida head coach Matthew Driscoll, fresh off a pair of high major road wins, one over Georgia Tech on Sunday and one over South Carolina on Monday, 3-0 for the week. How does that winning feel, coach?
Well, I'll tell you what, the food tastes a whole lot better. I can tell you that. We're so used to, actually, it was our 100th guaranteed game in
Wow.
my 16-year career. So usually it's somewhere between 5 and 7, just depending on the flavor and what the money looks like and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. So it was the 100th one, which is kind of a cool anniversary. And also, too, for our guys, I think as we get into this and go through this, I think there's a lot of things that come into play, especially when you're preparing. When you take the North off and it just says Florida, I think some people have a different understanding or maybe a different approach. And I was there. I was obviously a high major coach at Clemson
Mm-hmm.
for 5 years and then at Baylor for Scott's first 6 years, which I like to refer to as the lean years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
when
You miss the good times.
oh, there's no question about that now. That tree's pretty good now. But when you have those games and you're going into that preparation and you're getting ready for them, I think when we look at it statistically and what transpired with South Carolina, how we're down whatever it was, 5 or 7, went on a 15-7 run to end the game. I think we scored 6 of our last 7. And then for Georgia Tech to start the second half, getting us down 5 again. And our guys to have the wherewithal, the resiliency to get it back up to 21 at one point. And
Ridiculous.
so, yeah, it's kind of a unique situation for me. It's not the first time we've had high major wins. Probably one of the greatest ever, obviously. And I'm reaching in my pocket for a reason. One of the greatest ones ever was obviously when we beat Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was 2010. Excuse me, that was 2014, the year we went to the NCAA tournament, 14-15. But we also played them in 2010. And I pulled this out. That's a penny. And
Ah,
I found this yesterday in the locker room.
okay.
And it was in the back. I was cleaning. I always like to clean the locker room. We like to leave places better than we found them. So I was cleaning up and I found this, but I never looked at the year. And so that particular year, you guys covered them at some point. Probably not you guys, but Jeff did for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Was the year that my best friend and my best man in my wedding, Scott Lang, died on the court at LaRoche College. And we were
Wow.
going to play Purdue. And so it was 2010. And so when
Wow.
I looked at it this morning, when I magnified it, I was like, okay, this is really, really cool.
That's a special one.
Well, then we went back to Purdue and beat them. And that year they went to the NCAA tournament. They
Mm-hmm.
were a really good team. So were
Yeah.
we. And that score, we went on a 14-7 run to end it. And then the next year we beat Illinois to open up the season.
Yep.
And we really led wire to wire. We made, 17, 18, 19 threes, whatever. And so in that particular case, it's very similar to South Carolina in the sense that it was the opener as opposed to the other one was in December. So people kind of knew who we were, so to speak. And when you get to South Carolina or you're our team, in the last 5 years, we've led the country and made threes per game, including last year, more than Alabama, BYU. We led the country. And so when you have that ability to stretch it and shoot it, I'd like to take 30 or 40, preferably. However, what it does is we shot 78% yesterday at the rim.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
78% at the rim.
That was the crazy part when I looked at it too. I was just like, you guys didn't shoot it super well against South Carolina either, based on how well you guys
No,
can shoot, and you guys still
no,
won.
no. We were both. I mean, both of those games, the 3-pointer, but it is because it creates something
Mm-hmm.
where you have to play it, you have to guard it, you have to prepare for it. Of course, we made 15 when we beat Charleston Southern the other night, and so because of that, it creates some double gaps and the ability to do some different things. But you got to play off two. You got to be able to finish. You got to be able to play through contact. And we got 29 free throws,
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, I think Georgia Tech took 12 maybe. And so
Yeah.
we're usually one of the least fouling teams in the league. But in this particular case, our guys did a great job as well, just walling up and POVing and just protecting and not being haphazard. And that led to a lot of daggers, which are score-stop scores. And when we do that, we got a chance, because if you think about it, score-stop score, let's say you get a 3, so you're +3. If you
Mm-hmm.
get a double dagger, score-stop score, stop score, and you get a 2, now you're +5.
Yep.
And so those things start to build. And usually
Yeah,
when we get 6 of them, we're 92% winning.
That's a
that's
good
right,
one.
Coach. Yeah, Coach Driscoll, I also heard you talking a little bit about in the South Carolina game. I think it was something like if you combine the last 6 or 7 possessions of the first half and the first 6 or 7 possessions of the second half, you had basically 11 out of 14 stops combined. 6 out of 7 to start the end of the first, 5 out of 7 to start the second, and that just the ability to swing a game. I mean, even for the audience that's more familiar with football right now, we're just getting into basketball season for a lot of the sports audience, but football is like that in a lot of ways too. If you can close a half strong and start the next half even stronger, it can really change and bury another team. Now, obviously, you didn't do that in the South Carolina game, but it really flipped it. Is there something that you guys talk about, whether it was preseason or just on the fly, about just working on those strategic situations and scenarios?
So great question. And I love that football analogy because I love college football. Two things.
Yeah,
I love college
likewise.
football, and it means that college basketball is getting ready to start.
There we go.
I
Thank you.
really love when people defer, because if you
Right.
defer, you got an opportunity to go in with 7 and come out with 7, which is a really powerful swing. And I think you're sending a message to your defense like, hey, man, like, we think you can get stops.
Yep.
So I think the defensive mindset, what we've done, and I give our staff so much credit. First of all, we've been together for so long. Bobby Kennan, Bruce Evans, Stephen Perkins, Chase Driscoll. We've been together for almost 16 years, all of us in some form or fashion. And so they said to me, Coach, I really think, because we didn't. So last year we had 7 new dudes. This year we got 8. So last year we went to Costa Rica. So we got 10 practices, 3 games. So we were kind of in the flow a little bit better. We thought Chaz Lanier had a chance. We're starting to get the Chaz Lanier vibe.
He's okay.
Yeah, that worked out.
This year we did it. So they're like, Coach, I know, like, if you go on my desk, I got every year, and I'm very, very OCD. I like things to be the way and I go back, and when we beat, and I tell you right now, when we beat Illinois opening game, I went back to the next practice because Dallas Moore, the greatest player that ever played for us, the leading scorer in Division I history in the state of Florida, he texted me right away, and he said, Coach, don't let off these dudes. Like, you know what it's like. You know what we were. And I'm like, oh, easy. Like, first of all, you're back-to-back champions. But I went back and looked at the next practice, and I told the guys, I said, guys, I haven't told it. I said, guys, look, this is what we did. Like, we did yoga. We did this. We did weights, and we did the same thing. We played UT Grand Martin or Rio Grande Valley, whatever they're called, and we beat them pretty good too. Like what ended up with the Charleston Southern game. So I'm like that. I'm very like that. But the staff said to me, I think we should hit more. So we hit Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. Tuesdays all install and non-contact. Thursdays off. Fridays more install, cleanup, and then Saturday hit. And it's very regimented through those 5 weeks. And so we did something this year that I've never done. Now, Chris Oliver is going to take all the credit for it, right? Because, he doesn't believe in the weave and he doesn't believe in all this stuff. He believes in all 5-on-5 and yada, yada, yada. Well, we did that. And the staff was like, Coach, let's play more, let's play more, let's play more. So I really feel like there's a strong correlation between those two things. In my opinion, this early in the season, we had 14 guys. We almost always had 7-on-7, rarely 7-on-6, a couple tweaked ankles here or there, but nothing craziness. And so really healthy. And the other thing too, you say about that defensive part coming out with the South Carolina. And then if you talk about the Georgia Tech situation defensively too, this group really has a knack or an ability. So we got 6 dudes returning. Yep. 5 of them were starters. And you're like, oh, wow, that's great. But they all didn't start at the same time. 2 of them started, and then halfway through the season, 2 more took their place. 1 torn ACL. Kid had to play, being all freshman. He had a great game yesterday. Damon started. Damon loved him because he's a 5'9", bench is 260. He's got a 50-inch approach vert and yada, yada, yada. And then Josiah Miles, we were going to redshirt, and he was playing so wow. So those 2 freshmen started. And that's the one thing, guys, that we've really embraced. I mean, Josh Harris, you guys love him.
He was awesome.
I mean, he's an 18-year-old freshman.
Killing it.
Drives me nuts in the summer, right? but what he has, he's got a talent that we all want. And he's got a skill that we all want. He plays extremely hard.
Yep.
And every single play, he thinks we run for him. And he gets mad when the guys turn the ball over. Like, just get a shot up, because he just has an unbelievable ability to just fetch the ball.
Has that motor, yeah.
It's no doubt. He's 6A player of the year, a little undersized, a little this, a little that. And that's where we've had the most success. Dallas Moore, little this, little Bo Beats, little Chris Davenport, Bebe Daniels, Garrett Sams, Carter Hendrickson, Wajid Aminu. Heck, I was the only guy on staff that didn't want to watch it. I'm like, he ain't good enough. But again, 4 assistant coaches say, no, coach, you're wrong. He ends up being all-time rebounder, all-time blocks. He'll be in the Hall of Fame, yada, yada, yada. So to your point, I think we've done a really good job helping these guys understand. Our theme this year is play to win. So in a race, everybody's going to run to try to win. But it says specifically, you have to run in such a way. It's a specific way. Like, it ain't about half-stepping. It ain't about doing it like that. Like, you got to run in a specific way. And because of that, you run to win, right? And then at the end of it is the confidence to finish. But it's not TO. It's the number 2. And at first, when we did it, I loved it because it was like cool. Like, the logo's cool. But then I'm like, golly, 2. Like, what are we going to do with the 2? Because we got to do. And then the guys are like, last 2 minutes, first 2 minutes of the second half, last 2 minutes of the first half. There's 2 halves. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. So they were coming up with it on their own. And
easy. Keep it simple.
The confidence to finish, in order to have confidence, and the way we play with a lot of confidence. In order to have confidence, you can't be afraid. If someone's going to laugh at you, if someone's going to think this of you, like, when you have confidence, you're not afraid, right? And also, too, you believe. You believe. And that's where these guys are, in my opinion. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. And one guy that has kind of really stood out for you guys is Liam Murphy, transferred from the Ivy League level. Can you get a little bit into how his recruitment went, how you guys landed him? Because that just feels like the perfect guy to add to your system. And that's an awesome shirt right there.
You like that?
That's awesome, yeah.
See the finish line? See the finish line, like a race car finish?
That's awesome. You guys definitely have the confidence, that's for sure.
So Liam is amazing. He's a great dude.
ACL, right? Yeah.
Say it again?
He came off of ACL, didn't he, Liam?
No. So, hey, first of all, this brother, right? So I do this presentation about, you know, money and 168 hours in a week, and everyone wants to be a pro, and what are you gonna do to be a pro? And here's what an average person coming out of college makes, and here's taxes and all that stuff. Here's what you make when you play overseas, and there's no taxes. And I do this whole deal. And at the very bottom, I do this thing on the S&P 500. You put $100 in, you put $500 in, and you get a promotion, and you get first 10 years, second 10 years, and then you go 40 years. And then you can have this much money when you're done. And when I got done doing it, he comes up to me the next day. He said, "Man, coach, Columbia grad. So this job." He's like, "Man, coach, I just dropped a ton back into the S&P 500." And we laugh about it. That was like 2 months ago, and he's crushed it because the S&P is up, going crazy. But here's what's crazy. Like, so we always put a round peg in a round hole. And so we don't get this dude. We don't get we're missing out on dudes like him. And it became very frustrating to me. Like, our system, your skill level, what are we doing? And all of a sudden, this dude appears. And I'm telling you right now, we don't mass recruit. We don't mass email. We don't mass send out stuff. We've never done it for 16 years, and we're not going to start doing it now. We're very specific. We're very personal, very relational, and whatever. Everybody's got their own flavor, right? Cookies and cream. So with Liam, Jim Ingles is a very, very dear friend of mine. Just beat Villanova.
Big win.
Their AD, Peter Pilling, was with me at Wyoming in the late 90s.
I love Peter.
About hiring Jim Ingles. And so we're start doing the background channel. He had a torn hip labral. But let me tell you what he had. He averaged 12-5 as a freshman in the Ivy League. 12-5. So I'm saying to myself, no brainer. So I go to our trainer. You're going to love this. Our trainer's been with us 16 years, took a little 3-year hiatus, but he came from Texas at the same time I came from Baylor. So for 6 years, I shook hands with them. They beat us every single game for 6 years. I didn't know him from Adam. Hey, good job, good luck. Except the very last game, before I got the job, we beat him in the tournament. And so our trainer had LaMarcus Aldridge. And if you remember, LaMarcus had a torn hip labral. And coach rebounded for him every single day. So I hurry up and I text coach while I'm on the phone with Liam. And I'm like, what does this mean? And he said, "Coach, he's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. If you want him, get him." So that's what I did. Hey, Grace, part of the story. His girlfriend goes to Florida.
Oh.
Wait, it gets way better. So I'm like, pull the hammer. I'm like in Vegas, right? All sevens. So he's like, "Yeah, my girl goes to Florida, yada, yada." And I'm thinking, man, this is going to work out great. So we're talking, like we're setting up a visit. He's like, "Oh, coach, this is going to be perfect because I'm actually driving down to Florida." And I'm like, "Oh man, this is like really perfect. What are you coming down on, to come move her home, or what are you doing?" "No, coach, she's graduating to move back home." I was like,
Too good to be true.
We ain't getting them. like there ain't no way, because she's coming. And I'm like, "Is she going to come back to grad school? We actually have a great nursing program, yada, yada, yada." And he's like, "No, she's staying in New York and yada, yada, yada." And I'm like, "Oh man, we ain't getting this joker." But great visit, unbelievable kid. Really can shoot the living dog out of it.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to miss. He's got a knack around the rim, uberly tough, like really understands the game well. So he's been a really, really special transfer from the portal, as is Nate Litteris. The thing about Nate is, check this out. We've had 15 new players in the last 2 years. We have 14 guys on the roster. Only one of them has played with us for longer than a season. One guy.
Wow.
So the other guys are either their first season or 3 games into their second season, including.
Well, that's our excuse for not putting you in the preseason top 25, but we fixed that this week.
And 7th in the preseason ASUN. Like, people did not see this coming.
Well, but Nate Litteris, what we love about Nate and we lean on is he was at Longwood. And what did Longwood do? Go to the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
So here's a kid that, and I say it all the time around the guys. Hey, he's done it. He's been there. Like, he knows what it's like to do that. Like, and he's really, really, really good about that. He can shoot the dog out. How about this one? First player in history. First player in history. We're going to play Nebraska. That's where he's from. They're having a Nate Litteris Day. They're selling tickets for $10 a piece, and they're like celebrating them coming home. How crazy is that?
That is crazy.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. It is awesome.
I didn't know
Now they're
Nate
probably
Litteris
worried
was such
about
a big
winning
name
the
in Nebraska.
Me neither. How about his dunk yesterday?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Should have been top 10, right?
Oh yeah, easily. They got to pick up on that. What are we doing here?
Hey, the game was on ESPN.
Yeah, that's a miss. That's a miss.
It's a bad miss. Hey, Coach, so you guys are actually playing tomorrow night for the championship of this mini MTE, which Georgia Tech and Georgia paid a lot of money to get you and Texas Southern to play home games against them. But now we have an actual championship game. So I know you talked a little bit. I've been doing some research about the windshield philosophy. I don't know if you want to tell our audience about that and what your thoughts are heading into Athens. I think you're in Athens already.
So it's when you talk about what you're asking, one of the hardest things to do is beat South Carolina and then come play a home game against Charleston Southern.
Yep.
Because everybody's patting you on your back.
Yep.
And so right away, we went right to Thessalonians and we talked about put everything behind you in the past and move forward looking for what lies ahead. And so what's a better example or analogy than a windshield, right? The rear view mirror is the smallest window to look at. And when you look at it, it's what, but I did tell the guys this, you can't forget what you did. I'm not telling you to forget the past. Don't ever forget it. What did you learn from it? What did you grow from it? Where did you whatever? But look through that front windshield, the biggest window on the car. And if you had a Pacer, it'd even be bigger. The biggest window on the car, and really see everything that lies in front of you and lies ahead of you. And so Coach Evans, to his credit, had to scout that night. And he started to scout off basically, because every security and every single person that you came into the arena, oh, you guys are the best. Oh, you guys are the greatest. Oh, you're this. And I'm like, dudes, like, we're going to celebrate tonight. Tomorrow we're watching out. And the next day we had it. Like, it's the next one. It ain't about getting a steak and a check. Like, it's about going 1-0 and who's next. And so that windshield helps you to understand there's so much in front of you. So much. But you can't forget, every once in a while you have to look at it because there's some crumbs. In my opinion, all success, there's 365 of us in the country, Division I men's coaches. All success, there are little crumbs we've picked up along the way. Coach Drew, when I got hired at Valparaiso and I was there for 7 weeks, Coach Drew made me do an assignment. And he gave me 8 videos of Kansas, Roy Williams, Kirk Heinrich was the lead guard, and he wanted to know why they were the fastest team in America. So I do this entire study on Kansas, give them this entire thing on Kansas. Coach and I are going into our 22nd season as a relationship, friends, coaches, whatever. He's never used one thing that I ever gave him. However,
he wants the information.
I loved it. And I thought, man, if I ever get the opportunity, then this is how we're going to inbound the ball. This is how we're going to get the ball to Kirk Heinrich, whoever that person is. And so everything matters. In our program, we are purposeful in everything we do. Like, we're going to go bowl in a minute. And the main reason we're going to go bowl is because, number one, coaching staff's never lost in our career. Number two, we can knock them down a peg and help them understand that they got to bring it every single night. And then after that, we'll go get a nice dinner and finish up our preparation for Georgia tomorrow night, who's extremely big, very athletic, rebounds a living dog out of it, 19 a game on second chance points. Our first 3 games, this is crazy for us. Our first 3 games, we've had more second chance points than our opponent, which is, for us, is just, because we shoot so many threes sometimes.
Right, long rebounds. Yeah.
But they got the dude from Mount St. Mary's, I don't know name.
Dakota LaFew?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I just know numbers. But the dude, he's like Chaz Lanier last year. Chaz took 13.
Number one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Chaz took 13 shots. He took 15 last year. But my point is, can really, really, really shoot the P out of it. Zero can shoot the P out of it. They really play downhill and they really play physical inside. And so with all that said, and understand, they scored 114 against Central Florida, I believe, in an exhibition game.
Exhibition game, yeah. They went
they got a potential lottery pick. So this creates a completely different avenue for tomorrow night. However, we washed it out this morning. We went over there a little bit ago, and our preparation was very on point. Our guys' demeanor was very on point. And the one thing the one thing anyone will tell you about us, anybody, is our consistency of who we are, what we stand for, our discipline, and our commitment. It is extremely consistent. And so because of that, the guys understand. And I coach them hard. And sometimes it really hurts my heart. Like, it really hurts my heart. Yesterday is a good example. There was a couple times where, and I told them this morning, I was like, Cameron, it's not about that play. It's about the 20 or 30 more that are coming. They're coming. January 2nd, when it's league play, when everything matters at this level, when seeding matters for home games, where bids are won, it matters. So you got to understand, I know we were up 20 or 18 or whatever. That doesn't matter. It's what it means further down the road. So the purposeful approach that we have is very consistent.
That's amazing that you can have those teaching moments through winning. It's a lot better. It's a lot better than the alternative, right, Coach? Yeah, and I think that's and one of the big themes on our show this week is the ASUN. I mean, no other league in we cover we call them the other 22 leagues, the non-high major leagues, and the only league that really made a big flash in the pan was your league. I know you're tracking all these teams from afar, and that is what the season will come down to later. But I mean, just Austin Peay goes into Butler. Lipscomb looks tremendous. Just a lot of surprises overall. North Alabama performed at a level that has Bart Torvik's rankings saying they're top 25 after a game or two. So there's just a lot of great stories. In my help I do during the offseason with scheduling, the ASUN was looking, at least from a scheduling standpoint, as a down year, and in 1 week it flipped. I'm just wondering, what would you like to say about the league as a whole, or how much are you focused on it right now?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you asked that question, because if you go back to my media day comment, coaches' polls are probably more accurate and have a better feel because we understand who's transferred.
Yeah,
we understand who stayed, because we track that very hard. We have lists and reports, and we're very, very focused in on what the other teams are doing, who's doing what, yada, yada, yada. And so I said this, Lipscomb, you can talk all you want about him, but the preseason player of the year didn't play last year.
Yep.
So, he ends up being player of the week this week. And then you look at Austin Peay, and, they get this big-time transfer in, and obviously he had a stellar night, and then they do. And then you look at, he got newcomer of the week. So how good's our league? Well,
pretty good.
We didn't get any POVs or NOWs or anything. And I'm on with you guys. So it's the every league you play in is the best league in America.
That's right.
Alabama, what people don't understand about them is Ortiz can really ball, and he was at UAB last year, and he came back.
Yeah,
he came back, boomerang.
So my point is, you just don't know what you don't know until you kind of weed and get through what's going to transpire in the non-conference. And then the next phase happens. Injury, illness, attrition. Amitri Moss is a great example. 6 minutes to go. We're up 8 at Stetson. Tears his ACL. So, Ognisevich doesn't play last year.
Yeah, that was huge. That was huge.
So, but Sharp for Austin P was hurt for most of the league season. And then they got hot, and then they got him back and ended up making a run to the tournament, to the championship. And so, and I'm not trying to leave anybody out because I don't want to just talk about everybody.
Right.
But EKU.
We got that covered. Don't worry.
EKU had a great road with themselves. They wanted ETSU.
That's what I'm saying. You mentioned EKU.
Yeah.
Blanton's a monster.
Monster. Yeah.
Beast.
He's definitely a first teamer. All ASUN. Yeah.
I mean, he's a beast mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so, JU with everybody that they have back, and McCray is probably, you could argue because everybody wants to, NBA prospects and all those kind of things. Last year was a no-brainer. Chaslinier was the best.
Oh, no doubt.
But nobody knew that.
No.
Nobody knew that.
No.
I mean, we thought he was going to be good. We didn't realize he was going to be the number one most efficient player in America.
You didn't know he's going to be at Tennessee this year.
50, 40, and 90.
Right.
Real numbers. Only guy in the history of the league in league
That's crazy.
play. 50, 40, 90 with over 50 made threes and 100 made field goals. No, there's no one even close. So, yeah, the league's the league. Yeah, the league's the league. And, there's other, Florida Gulf Coast, obviously they got to, now because you got Stetson, you got Queens, you got West Georgia just came in the league, right?
Yep.
You got Central Arkansas with a new Princeton-style offense, pairs up with North Alabama. You got Bellarmine, who's got one of the greatest coaches to ever coach the game.
Right.
And you got EKU as well, too, and we already talked about it. So that's all 12 teams. I mentioned them all, so no one could say a word.
You managed to get it all in. I'm impressed.
Oh, don't forget. Don't forget these guys.
Oh, no, can't forget.
Don't forget those
That
guys.
is a nice shirt.
Isn't that logo cool?
Yeah, it is a very cool.
I love it. I love it.
That Osprey boy, that Osprey can get you, and it gets you now. Look out.
Your energy, Coach, is just awesome. I mean,
it's the best.
I don't know if it's only our second week of the show. We're going to be doing this all year long across these 22 leagues. I don't know if this energy will ever be matched again. I actually feel bad. I'm coming off of a college football weekend myself where I went to Penn State for the first time. I just got back late last night. I usually be matching you pound for pound, but you got me beat, and for good reason. The Ospreys are 3-0. And we're enjoying the story. I can't wait to watch tomorrow night's game. I'll be watching that with undivided attention.
100%. Yeah, Rocco's Washington Huskies also got beat. That wasn't very good for him. Yeah, that tends to happen a lot these days. But one team that's not getting beat is the North Florida Ospreys. So thanks to Coach Matthew Driscoll for coming on with us.
I really respect what you guys do. I watch and follow, obviously, and I know a lot of people do. And I think one thing that's going to help separate you guys, in my opinion, and what makes this conversation unique is that your preparation, right, along with this opportunity, is going to lead to your success later in life, because you guys came on and you asked some really good questions that had some depth to it, had some teeth to it, and they weren't just, vagabond type questions. And so I'm grateful for that, because I think it makes the story even that much better. I would say that Oregon obviously is going to be a tough road, especially if Gabriel stays healthy. Ohio State, you never know, with that scenario and how that's going to pan out with them. And then whatever 5, 4, 6, 8, 2 teams from the SEC get in there as well too. But Army's got a chance. Good. Army's got a chance.
They do.
I hope Army gets in. Army
deserves. Hey, Dr. Murphy,
play with Notre Dame.
Dr. Murphy, our team doctor, played football there.
Really?
And,
wow.
They got a chance. They
can shorten a game better than anybody. I mean, I was paying attention to that game. It was halftime. Then there was 2 minutes left in the game. Within 20 minutes, it felt like they can shorten that game better than anybody.
Hey, the last story. So we get to the second media last night, and it's we're on a 100-point pace, both teams. And I got in the huddle with the guys, and I said, okay, this is what it's going to be today, huh? This is how it's going to be? Okay, if this is how it's going to be, and we ain't going to guard, then we better score 100. Because I'm telling you right now, we're on the way to a pillow fight, and the first team to 100 is going to win. So if you decide you don't want to guard, okay, but you better be the first 100.
They were.
That's pretty cool. Rick Bird used to always call these pillow fights. Like
That's
when
awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Man, what a great
and
coach he
he's a
was.
Hall of Famer.
Absolute legend, Rick Bird. We
Legend.
love him.
What a good
Yes.
human being. Great golfer,
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Really?
I
great
can see
golfer.
that. I can definitely see that.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I think he rates courses.
Really?
I think
working at Belmont, you got some good access to golf.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he was
So,
so good
you
to us
played that up.
when he left the league. He was so good to me. I mean, he met with our staff for about 12 hours one day after meeting
Wow.
with Steve Prohm the day before his first stop at Murray State, and then we spent the day with Coach.
That's
So
great.
a lot of things that he did, especially shooting it and spacing it. Just tried to pick his brain on that kind of stuff.
I love that. Yeah,
Awesome.
we're so excited for you, Coach.